Okay, think about it for a moment. How much of what you think is just, well, fundamentally true? Like, just the way things are. Have you ever considered how much of that might actually be shaped by, where you grew up? Today, we're kind of pulling back the curtain on that. We're doing a deep dive into the fascinating world of cross-cultural viewpoints. Our mission is really to explore how deeply culture influences our perceptions, even on subjects we might think are totally universal or, straightforward. We'll look at two really different areas today. First, our ideas about beauty, and then the tricky world of business ethics.
Yeah, and what's so interesting here is how these sources, they really challenge our assumptions, don't they? They show that even concepts that seem totally ingrained, like attractiveness or what's right and wrong in business, they're incredibly well flexible across different societies. It raises a big question, I think. If these things aren't universal, what else isn't?
That idea of universality,
Mm,
yeah, it starts to unravel pretty quickly, especially with something as personal as beauty.
mm.
We all know the saying, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But is it really all subjective, or are there maybe some universal standards?
Mm.
Well, one perspective on this comes from Dr. Devendra Singh. He's an evolutionary psychologist. And his idea, his hypothesis, is that yes, there are universal standards, and they're rooted in evolution.
Okay, evolution. How so?
So his research looked at people from lots of different cultures, and he found this striking similarity in how they rated attractiveness. Specifically, he argues that an hourglass shape in women, where the waist is about 70% as wide as the hips,
Right.
is pretty much universally preferred by men.
And the thinking behind that.
It's primal, really. He
Oh.
suggests it's subconsciously linked to fertility, a woman's reproductive potential, which is a big evolutionary advantage, obviously.
Right, okay.
When we-
Survival of the fittest, basically.
Exactly. And what's interesting, too, is he says this ideal holds up even if the woman is technically overweight. It's the ratio that matters.
Okay, so that's one strong argument for biology.
Yeah.
But like you said, is that the whole picture? Because if we look broader, well, not everyone agrees. It's only evolution driving this.
Right. There's always another side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Dr. Douglas Yu, he's a biologist too. He offers a really strong counter perspective. He emphasizes the power of culture.
Culture. Okay.
Hmm.
How does that play in?
Well, Dr. Yu believes that culture, specifically our exposure to mass media, entertainment, advertising, that's actually the biggest influence on how men judge beauty,
Huh. So more powerful than evolution.
potentially.
Yeah.
He did this fascinating study. He went to this really remote, isolated community in southeast Peru, like way off the grid, no modern media.
Wow. Okay. And what did he find there?
His findings were, well, the complete opposite of Dr. Singh's predictions.
Mm.
Men in this community strongly preferred heavier women, women with wider waists.
No kidding. So the exact opposite of the hourglass ideal.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really compelling.
Mm-hmm.
He then surveyed two other groups from the very same Peruvian community. But these groups had seen more Western media.
Yeah. Okay.
Their beauty standards were totally different. They shifted dramatically towards the Western norm, preferring slimmer figures.
Wow. So the media exposure seemed to directly change their preferences.
It's strongly suggested. So, yeah, maybe evolution lays some groundwork, sure. But Dr. Yu's findings make a powerful case that cultural influence, especially from media, can significantly reshape, maybe even overwrite, those ideals.
So what we've got here is this really fascinating debate. On one hand, maybe some biological basics, some deep-seated preferences. But on the other, Dr. Yu's work shows just how, well, changeable our perceptions are. Like our cultural lens, especially media, profoundly reshapes what we find attractive.
It really makes you think about how much of our reality is actually constructed, not just passively observed.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Okay, so that's beauty. Incredibly revealing. And it makes you wonder, right? If something so personal, so seemingly instinctive, can be shaped so much by culture, then what happens when we talk about something more structured, like business dealings, international business?
Yeah, where you'd expect more solid rules.
Exactly. Do the rules of right and wrong hold up universally there, or do they also kind of bend with the cultural winds? This brings us to this idea called ethical relativism.
Right, the idea that good and bad aren't fixed.
Yeah, basically that what's seen as right or wrong depends heavily on the specific culture or group you're talking about. And you see this really clearly when you look at how different cultures view bribery.
Ah, yeah, that's a big one.
Totally. In some places, the U.S., for example, it's flat out illegal, seen as corrupt. full stop. But in other countries, well, sometimes it's tolerated or maybe even expected in certain situations.
Like those grease payments you hear about.
Exactly. Those small payments, often to low-level officials, just to speed up routine stuff, things they have to do anyway, like getting a phone installed or processing a payment that's already approved.
Right. Not necessarily to buy a decision, but just to get things moving.
Precisely. And in some cultures, these aren't really seen as bribes in the corrupt sense. Maybe they're viewed as, I don't know, supplements to low wages, or just the way you avoid unnecessary hassle or delays.
Which creates a huge challenge, obviously, for companies trying to work globally.
Yeah.
How do you operate when the basic definition of ethical behavior seems to shift from place to place?
Hmm.
Think about the U.S. approach. Back in the 1970s, they passed this really significant law, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act,
Hmm.
the FCPA.
Right, I've heard of that.
It basically made it illegal for any U.S. business or anyone acting for them to bribe foreign government officials or agents, period.
And the consequences were serious.
Oh, yeah. Big fines, potentially up to twice the bribe amount. And individuals could actually face prison time, up to 5 years.
Wow. So very clear stance.
It's very clear. But here's the unintended consequence. It put U.S. businesses at a real disadvantage internationally
How so?
because companies from other countries weren't bound by the same rules. They could still make those grease payments or even larger bribes without facing legal trouble back home.
Ah, so it created an uneven playing field. U.S. companies had their hands tied.
Exactly. Which wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, you can see how that would be a problem. It's tough trying to enforce a standard when you're the only one following it. So the U.S. realized pretty quickly it couldn't really tackle this alone.
Right.
And that led to a much bigger international effort, recognizing this global imbalance. In 1997, a bunch of countries, 34 initially, signed this major agreement. Okay, what was that? It's called the Convention on Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials in International Business Transactions.
Right.
Quite a mouthful.
Ah, yeah. But important.
Very. The goal was basically to get everyone on the same page, or at least closer, to crack down internationally on practices like bribery and level that playing field a bit.
But, even with these laws, the FCPA, this international convention, the core problem, the ambiguity, it doesn't just disappear.
What do you mean?
Well, how do you actually draw a clear, universally accepted line between a bribe and a gift? Especially when cultural norms about gift-giving vary so wildly.
That's a good point. Is it defined anywhere?
Not clearly, according to the sources. Neither the FCPA nor the international agreement gives a perfect definition that works everywhere.
So how do companies navigate that?
It's tricky. The general guidance seems to be about intent. A bribe is usually seen as something, especially money, given with a specific intention of influencing a decision or getting some favorable action.
Okay, the intent is key.
Right. Whereas a gift is generally not considered a bribe if it's given, say, after a deal's already done or after a service has been provided. The idea being there's no expectation of influencing future actions.
Okay, so timing and intent seem to be the main differentiators, even if it's still a bit fuzzy.
Exactly. Still fuzzy.
Wow. That lack of a clear line, it really just highlights how difficult it is to create these universal standards, doesn't it? Even for something like business that feels like it should have hard rules.
It really does.
It shows just how deep these cultural practices run. So when we pull it all together from, the subtle things like what we find beautiful all the way to these really complex questions in international business, this whole deep dive, it just reveals how profoundly culture shapes our whole understanding of the world around us.
Absolutely.
It's a pretty powerful reminder, I think, that what feels completely normal to us, well, it might be totally unusual to someone else.
And thinking about that, it kind of pushes us further, doesn't it? What other things that we assume are universal truths? What if they're actually way more culturally relative than we even realize? And what does that mean for how we deal with global issues, or just how we interact with people who come from backgrounds that are really different from our own? Something to chew on.